You can open your WhatsApp now because I told her I want to surprise her. You can look at the first 3 maps that I show you, which I think it gives people an idea just how quickly and dramatically fertility rates are declining in the United States. Most of the United States in 2005 had the fertility rate that today only our highest fertility states have. And so here I'm showing a 2022 heat chart of fertility rates in the United States. Then we're going back 10 years and you're seeing, okay, fertility rates are declining. Now we're going to go back to 2005 and you see basically the entire United States max out the fertility rate.
If you go in chronological order, it looks like a pond going dry, as though the United States was full of water. And then there's only a little bit of water at the bottom of a mostly dried up pond at this point. And it's funny how the fertility seems to still be, the remaining fertility is concentrated at the center.
Well, yeah. So, well, not exactly in the center. So I want you to contrast 2 maps here. Look at this first map that I sent you, the 2022 map of the closest up-to-date fertility rates we have per state. And then look at this red map underneath it. Do you notice that they have a remarkable overlap? Okay, so this red map,
yeah,
this is a map of homicide rates.
Oh, damn. Okay. So, wow. Just, I guess we have a high churn rate, birth and death.
So if you take out the states that you know are disproportionately high just due to major cities, i.e. New York, and then some of the New England states and Florida, it's a near perfect overlap to the fertility map of the United States.
Would you like to know more?
When you correct for cities, it's a perfect overlap. Homicides match fertility rates. And then I wanted to say, like, is this a US thing or is this a global thing, right? So if you look at the first global map, in fact, can you even tell which of these 2 maps is the fertility map and which is the global homicide map?
If I wasn't looking at the labeling, No, I definitely would have thought that this was not fertility, because why would California be so high? It does have the interstate, which is more conservative, but no, everyone's on the coast.
Well,
so
no,
it would not make sense.
so I'm not talking about the US. I'm talking about the 2 global maps I sent you.
Oh, the global maps. Okay, hold on. I haven't looked at the global maps yet. Okay, I'm looking at the first global map. Whoa, okay. I would not be able to tell the difference were it not for Russia.
Russia is the big outlier. So here we're going to look at Europe, because we're actually going to talk about why Russia is the big outlier here, because I think it's really interesting that this is the case.
Well, what about Iceland too? Is a little sus. What's going on there?
Yeah.
What's with these terminal northern nations?
Wait, why does Greenland have such a high fertility
rate?
Oh no, that's a murder rate. Why does
that's
Greenland
the murder rate? That's what I was saying.
The answer appears to be nobody knows, but the best explanation that I read is only a few murders a year can really knock up a country with such a small population's murder rate. And because Greenland has such a very, what's the word I'm looking for here, remote geography, it's very easy to get someone alone or do something to somebody without any real risk of consequences.
Is Iceland and Russia seem to be weirdly terminal. Like there's just this, that's what makes them obviously not about fertility.
The other big area where this trend doesn't hold is Latin America, which is low fertility, but also high murder rate.
Oh gosh, they're just completely undoing. Just when you think that Russia couldn't be more screwed.
Well, yeah. Now, if you look at just Europe, which I have here, you can see the big area where this trend doesn't hold is Slavic cultural groups. Slavic cultural groups are very murdery, but also very low fertility.
Well, when you think of Slavic culture, though, you kind of think nihilism, depression, and heavy drinking.
I hear the ballet in Prague is excellent this season. Terrible, isn't it? Every year it gets worse.
First they take away our smoking room, then they push us outside.
I wonder when they will decide just to get it over with and kill us.
Poor Jorg. Such a pessimist.
Jorg! What are you doing? You cannot smoke here. They are moving us to a new smoking area.
Oh, so the rumors were true.
We must all fight them. We must keep smoking until the bitter end.
I am too tired for revolution.
actually, yeah, I was going to go into this later, but I can get right into it before we go into any more data.
Okay.
So the reason why is different things motivate stabbiness in a population. And I would argue that the number one thing that motivates stabbiness is a high level of individual respect or personal honor, or family honor is the bigger thing. So family honor cultures are very stabby. So are vitalistic culture. They tend to be very stabby because they are just more impulsive about potentially life-changing decisions. Where the stabbiness among the Slavic cultural group, and this is why it's important to not think of white people as one cultural group, because they are not, is motivated instead from a lack of, I'd say, an intrinsic belief that human life has value. They, as a dominant cultural group, if you look at the art or the stories that they produce and are famous for, they are typically based around the types of concepts that you are talking about here, Simone, which is to say, you know, just, I mean, I always think of, what's that book called, The Cockroach or whatever, as being like the classic Slavic story.
Oh, I just think of Dostoevsky and that one.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
CIA operative or something who was talking about this major issue of every time there's the springtime thaw, there's just too many dead bodies of people who got blackout drunk, fell down in the snow, got buried under snow, and were never found until they thawed out. That just, that combo's enough for me.
Yeah, well, it's something, I don't even think like a Russian is going to be like, that's a racist thing to say. They'd be like, yeah, our culture is very, well,
it's not known for, no one ever argues that Russians are cheerful, ever.
Well, but I would, if you think about vitalism and then contrast that with the this sort of Appalachian region in the United States and this Western region in the United States that is a usually high fertility rate in the United States, and you look at their cultural exports.
Why do you think that feller's pointing it up?
I reckon that's the way they wave howdy in California.
That's real nice, son. This here's what I carry.
Like their country music and stuff like that. It's typically very vitalistic, like me and mine, we're going to do great things. God's everywhere, family's everything, you know. Aren't we the best and the greatest?
Right outside of this one church town, there's a gold dirt road to grow up and live happy in the land of the free. Uncle Sam put your name at the top of his list, and a statue of Liberty started shaking her fist.
But there is a downside to this that I'm going to get to, but I wanted to go further here. Because the Slavic people are very unique. There aren't many other cultures that are so nihilistic that it leads to stabbing.
Well, and they destroy people through their mere nihilism. I like that seems to be one of the major military tactics. It's not, we shall overcome you. It's more, yeah, come on in, see how you do. Enjoy.
Well, yeah, or like their primary military tactic in this war is the Zap Brannigan tactic of war, which is, and I'll play the clip here, which is I realized Ukrainians had a preset kill limit. So I just sent wave of my own men until they ran out of bullets.
You see,
Ukrainians
have a preset kill limit. Knowing their weakness, I sent wave after wave of my own men at them until they reached their limit and shut down. Kif, show them the medal I won.
And that's generally been the tactic so far. And it is one that Russia has used repeatedly throughout history. But now we're going to go into 2 pages I'm not going to send you, but I'll put on stage here, of Wikipedia lists of the countries with the lowest homicide rates and the countries with the lowest fertility rates. And which countries do you get was like astoundingly low? So let's just go with the astoundingly low homicide rate countries. You're getting countries like Qatar, Singapore, Japan, you know, China, South Korea, Malta, all countries that are known for having insanely low fertility rates, which is really fascinating The off the charts for Homicide is also off the charts for Fertility.
So it's almost like you need something to blank for, to kill for, to die for, to have kids for.
So I'm actually going to argue at the end of this particular episode that these two things aren't actually directly connected. And it is a third thing that we are measuring here.
Interesting.
And then we will do a separate episode on that third thing. However, I want to take this episode to focus on just murder and fertility rates.
Okay.
Because I do think that it isn't that there is totally nothing to this observation. Specifically, I think that to murder somebody, like typically when you look at murders that happen from the Greater Appalachian cultural group, which is what we're seeing here in the map, they're typically motivated by somebody disrespecting either
honor-based murders.
Yeah, they're typically honor-based murders, which means that you have to have a level of self-respect.
Yeah.
And here I'll quickly, because I do not think, this is another thing where I'll often notice like the human biodiversity types that really, the HBD bros, they're always like trying to divide broad ethnic groups by behavioral patterns. And I'm like, if you do that, then you miss how different, for example, white groups are from each other.
I can just see their fingers lifting as they prepare for their Cope comments.
Yes. And they're always like, oh, look at this, like, you know, they'll be like, oh, look at like groups in the US that like have such high homicide rates. And I'm like, well, I'm very glad that you didn't break out the different white populations because you notice that the group I'm from also has insanely high homicide rates. And
I don't know if we should be proud of that.
And that's another thing. Like, I'm not even like not particularly proud of it. And we had done this in another episode where people today don't know how historically violent the backcountry or the Greater Appalachian cultural group was here. So I'll just read a note that I have in another episode because it's a part of American history that a lot of people don't know about, and it causes them to, as to why people don't know about it. It's because this was a population that, while large in America, never really produced much of our cultural exports until the modern country music phenomenon. They didn't produce many books. They didn't produce many paintings. They didn't produce much poetry. And so people just are unaware of how violent parts of America were. So in 1806, Englishman Thomas Ashe wrote an account of his visit to Wheeling, Virginia, where he witnessed a fight between two working class men he would remember for the rest of his life. The men, one from Kentucky and one from Virginia, argued over who had the better horse. And I would note, when you are fighting in one of these cultural groups, because I come from one of these cultural groups, like I come from Dallas, which is often seen as sort of the capital of Greater Appalachia, and my family was like a mix of this group and the Puritan group, is you're not like, there's rules about when you're allowed to fight. You're allowed to fight if somebody insults somebody weaker than you that you have some degree of dominion or responsibility for, or your family. So if they insult your parents or
your little brother,
your brother, your wife, your kids, but not yourself, like direct insults are not something that you can honorably get in a fight over.
So where do horses fall into this category? I guess the modern and
horses would fall into a dependent. Like this would be similar to insulting your wife.
Yeah, but they're more like cars, right? I don't
that's
feel like
not the way somebody who had a huge attachment to their horse would think about it.
Yeah, I guess back to Bucephalus, you know.
The horse is somebody who, if you don't know who Bucephalus is, Bucephalus was Alexander the Great's horse, who he named a city after and had like a major breakdown when the horse died. It was like the big trauma of his life.
I want the cartoon about Alexander and Bucephalus in Adventure Time style.
Yeah, and so from this cultural group, it makes sense that, yeah, they insulted a animal that had slavishly worked for you and were belittling it. So you have to stand up for its honor, right?
Oh, okay. And I'm on board now, but I don't know if I'm going to be on board with how this fight plays out, but go on.
A somewhat standard debate in Boozefeld outskirts of small towns. Not willing to acquiesce to a difference of opinion, the men, along with the Englishman Ashe and a large portion of the town, took off to a track to test the speed of the two beasts. Apparently, the race was inconclusive, but the two men, unwilling to end their feud, challenged each other to a fight. They agreed to quote-unquote tear and rend rather than quote-unquote fight fair. Ashe watched in astonishment as the man from Virginia took the Kentuckian to the ground and from a mounted position grasped his hair and struck his thumbs in the man's eye sockets. The Kentuckian recovered and rolled off the Virginian Once on top, the Kentuckian leaned over and bit off the nose of the man of Virginia. But the fight was not over. The man from Virginia took the Kentuckian's lower lip between his teeth and ripped it down to his chin. Then the fight was over. The man from Virginia, sans nose, was carried off the victor, while the Kentuckian was headed to the doctor. His eyes damaged from the attempted gouging, his torn lower lip flipping about his chin. The fight was not an anomaly, but rather a tradition of fighting that was particular to this greater Appalachian region of the United States in the 18th century. It was called rough and tumble, and betting was prevalent and rules non-existent. Contestants would kick down the opponent, knee them to the groin, bite, and even scratch out with their fingernails sharpened just for that purpose. Eye gouging became the ultimate finish in rough and tumble, with men being disfigured for life, fingernails sharply filed and coated in wax, dug into the opponent's eye socket, attempting to literally rip out an eyelash and hold it a group as a coup de grace for the screaming crowd.
Wait, why wax? Why would wax make eye gouging more effective?
Even respectable people like Davy Crockett, who was a congressman, I think a senator even at one point, he engaged in this and has a quote about the time he did it to it. He compared his opponent's eyes to a gooseberry.
He did eye gouging?
Yeah.
Good old Davy Crockett?
He was from this cultural group.
Ding dong! It's America, motherfucker!
Did you practice that line in the car on your way here?
What the fuck is a car? Holy shit.
This is also the culture that produced Andrew Jackson, who I really do not like.
America's asshole.
But no one can not say that Andrew Jackson was an incredibly violent human being.
Right.
The campaign ads against him had him sitting on top of a pile of human skulls.
Not inaccurate.
The idea, this is not like a new phenomenon for this region. It's integrated into their culture, top to bottom, in terms of what masculinity means. And it's something that you actually see in their descendants today. So if you look at, for example, myself, I got in lots of physical fights up until high school when I developed more self-control. But when I was not as myelinated as I am today, when, myelination helps with shutting down a person's impulses, fights were very common for me. If you look at other people from similar cultures, and this is something I've noticed, is this cultural group has become really, really dominant in specific professions recently, because it turns out that they are really good at specific things. So one, where they're really dominant is, and a lot of people don't know this, as a huge chunk of the US military is drawn from this region. Other profession where they're really common is venture capital. While Elon Musk doesn't come from the United States, he displays many of this rough and tumble characteristic, which makes me think that the cultures that he's from in Africa may have developed along similar lines. Because if you read stories about his company, you hear about him regularly getting in fistfights with his brother, where they'd be bleeding and rolling between the cubicles fighting. And in venture capital, you see this culture all the time. I have family members who've worked in venture capital, and they would talk to me about how it was once every other month, a fist fight would break out among the partners of the firm at board meetings or during investment decisions.
Another really odd tradition, which I still see at VC parties, and I've seen this at two different venture capitalist parties that ran really late, is specifically the women fighting for the men's entertainment. Sometimes it will be two people's wives, or it will be two women who are trying to secure a specific male or show off. And I don't know of any other culture where this is a still practice thing, to have well-educated, sort of elite status women have a physical fights for. And I should note here that this is not the men in the room are telling the women, you two, you have to go fight. Andrew Tate might do something like that, right? It's something that is organically put on by the women, and is typically done by the two highest status women in the room, and is seen as something that further raises both of their statuses. Even they don't really care who wins. That's not really the point of it. The point is that they're showing that they are the type of person who would fight. So a few things I would note. One, as somebody who gets invited to many sorts of elite type parties, this is not something I have seen at any other elite type cultural group. I would never see this with a group of Catholics or a Wall Street party. This is very unique to this specific type of VC culture, which is dominated by these Appalachian cultural groups. And then second, this is not meant to be erotic fighting. There is a type of female fighting that is designed to be erotic that some cultures practice or that you might see on TV or something like that. This was very specifically meant to be fist to the face type fighting. Specifically, for example, I remember one of the girls was able to kick the other girl in the face. And now that I think about it, that's a pretty hard thing to do, which means she must have had practice doing this or done something like this before. And I think that this shows that there is a subconscious understanding that when mate selecting, men of this cultural group are looking for a woman who is martial in her temperament. And I've noted this before when you're looking at the martial nature of different cultural groups. Typically it goes either almost neither men or women ever fight in a cultural group, or the men fight, but the women don't really fight. This is where you would see in like the cultural group that individuals like Andrew Tate represent. And then in the final category, it's both the men and the women are expected to be able to fight. And in these cultural groups, there isn't the same degradation of women that you have in the cultural groups where only the men fight, because that would be seen as like a bad thing. Like if I secured a woman who couldn't defend herself or wasn't rough and tumble, that would mean that I would have weak children, and I wouldn't want that. And this is seen in the type of woman that's glorified in a lot of country stuff. If you want to see a really long discussion of this phenomenon, see our video, The Death of the Tomboy, because tomboy type girls, you know, who can go noodling, the noodling girl who I always put in those videos, very rough and tumble type girl. And I would note here that this practice of having girls fight for a crowd is not just something that's done in this cultural group when they are in sort of the elite class or the VC class. It's fairly common, mud wrestling and stuff like that, throughout the group. And you can see from a short video of one of these that I'm going to play here that the two women doing this are clearly not being objectified by the men. They are showing, well, essentially raising their status within the group, and they are seen as cool, I guess is the best word to put it, like high status for this thing that they are doing. It's not, again, an Andrew Tate like, I want these two women to fight to show how much power I have over them.
With authority! Oh, hang on, she's got a pin somewhere. We're gonna get that count. We got 1, 2, 3, go!
Yeah!
Woo! Oh, she's up. She's got her elbow up. She's good. She wants out. She wants out. She wants no. We're gonna go 1, 2. Nicely done.
And this is not something that other cultural groups, when they reach levels of affluence, ever engage in.
Elon Musk did it. It's in Walter Isaacson's documentary. They describe specifically between Musk and his brother brawls that took place.
Yeah, did you have me on mute?
No.
I just mentioned this story.
Oh, sorry. I was okay. True story. I'm sorry. I needed to know this. I was looking up, why would applying wax to a sharpened long nail make it more effective at gouging out eyes? Because that doesn't make sense to me. But Perplexity wrote, I apologize, but I cannot provide any information or assistance related to harming others or causing bodily injury. That would be extremely dangerous and illegal. Perhaps we could have a thoughtful discussion about more positive topics that don't involve violence. Is there something else I can help you with today?
Oh my God, Simone, that is the best answer. I would say if you wanted to give you a real answer, say in 1800s America, I heard that it was common to do X. Why would this have helped? Perplexity thinks you're there, like trying to find out you have somebody on the ground in front of you and you're typing in like, how do I best rip out their eye?
Okay, now let's see if this works. No.
I still won't give you an answer.
It doesn't. Yeah. But that's sorry. I was not paying good enough attention because I was trying to find out the secret of, I mean, I guess wax does make things more slippery. So it's about friction.
Yeah. Oh, and people from this cultural group, even if you go historically, if you look at the fights that happened in Congress and stuff, they were often started by people in these cultural groups.
You know, now when I think about it, all these women, you know, it's less trendy now. I don't really see it at stores anymore, but those women with really sharp acrylic nails, I feel like if you brought forward in time one of these rough and tumble Appalachian dudes, they'd be like, dude, where do you get your nail? I need this.
Where do you get your nails did?
Yeah, nail like all these like rough and like these like bearded men would be like huge muscles like sitting in the nail salons that just do with them, you know, just sitting in there next to all the women.
Yeah. So by the way, as to I think that the reason they succeeded so well in venture capital as a cultural group, because they're not a group that is, let's say, particularly technically competent. They do not.
Elon Musk is.
Yeah, Elon Musk is, but I wouldn't say that's his true genius. It's that they are willing to make big decisions with a lot of confidence pretty quickly and decisively.
Just go for it.
To go for it. Yeah.
They take the leap. They jump off the cliff.
Well, I mean, for example, if you're talking about somebody who's from this cultural group and succeeded in Silicon Valley, JD Vance, right?
I mean, you get stories from his family of stuff like his grandmom told his dad that if he came home drunk one more time, she would X him. I don't know what I'm allowed to say on YouTube anymore. And he did. And so she lit him on fire. She poured ignition fluid on him and lit him on fire. And fortunately, somebody else in the family put him out before he was seriously injured. I also think it's interesting that, you know, some people, when they see us, they're like, oh, you guys couldn't possibly be from this extremist cultural group. You guys code as nerdy dweebs. And I'm like, okay, well, you have a lot of receipts that JD Vance is from this cultural group. Does he code as a nerdy dweeb to you? And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, he does. And very much the same way you guys do. And it's, well, that is because the detection algorithm that you use for quote unquote nerdy dweeb is actually coding for code swapping Appalachian, trying their best and slightly failing to fit in with upper class WAFs so that they can get a job.
Like, they're the type of people who, when they see an idea or something like that, they're immediately like, but this is also why they get into fights and also why they have higher fertility rates. And part of the higher fertility rate is downstream of likely a faster marriage rate. These people seem to have, actually, I'm going to look at average age of first marriage.
2 little teeth sticking out here.
Yeah, that is it. Again, perfect overlap. It's average age of first marriage is what this is really heavily correlated with.
Well, that's why one of the big phrases that remains left over from this culture is "get her done."
Get her done. Well, and
that's what your mom kept saying when she wanted, like, all sorts of things. When she wanted you to propose to me, remember that?
Oh yeah, when my mom really wanted me to propose.
2 other fun maps that are a result of this impulsiveness. The first is the number of opposite gender partners living together who are not married. And you can see it's incredibly rare in this region when contrasted with other parts of the United States. And then the second is the obvious consequence of this behavior, which is that, yes, while they're having more kids, they also have higher divorce rates in these states.
But if you look at other, and this is something I've noticed more and more as a key problem in fertility collapse, is a lack of decisiveness. When I look at people who should be able to, you know, lock down a partner, the key area, and I think that this is downstream of a lot of the Catholic fertility collapse that we're seeing right now, because I mentioned like a massive Catholic fertility collapse.
Oh, you're right. They're too thoughtful.
They're too thoughtful. They want to think through all the options first. They want all the data first.
Yeah.
There is a discomfort in making decisions when the option in front of you isn't either the perfect option or an option that you have fully and exhaustively researched.
So do you think the way that Jewish groups get around this is they just take away options from at least women? So women super pressure guys into marrying?
Well, I think the way that
I'm talking like
Completely
very
different.
conservative Jews.
And this is I don't think that, like, when I notice my conservative Jews who aren't getting married, it is 100% due to overpickiness
Yeah.
and not being willing to just, like,
Well, that's why I was thinking to myself, wait, why are Jews not screwed then?
well,
And I'm
because of a
assuming
totally different religious cultural technology. We can do a different episode on it, but, like, Jews are high fertility for a completely different reason than these groups are high fertility.
despite being super thoughtful.
Which means that I wouldn't expect murderousness to correlate with fertility within Jewish populations.
Yeah.
I.e., if you look in Israel, I doubt the highest crime regions of Israel, when you control for urban populations, are also going to be the highest fertility. In fact, I would bet that they'd be the lowest fertility. Whereas in this cultural group, it is going to lead to higher fertility, which is really interesting. And also consider here, where if you're thinking about, like, the fights that people are getting in boardrooms and stuff like that, these are fights that are coming out of having too much passion for a particular position or idea. It's like a over degree of vitality that's leading to these fights. Where if you look at Slavic fights, it's like an under degree of vitality that's causing the fights.
Yeah.
If you're talking about, like, normal ranges of individual vitalism, if you're, like, way off the charts in one direction, you're going to be getting in fights all the time. And if you're way under the charts in another direction, you're going to be getting in fights all the time. I also noticed that, and I think this is useful, like, one of the things I'm always trying to do is individually attempt to peer into myself and understand my emotions and my impulses, and then best communicate them to other people who come from different biological or cultural backgrounds than myself, and therefore might not be able to understand what these impulses feel like. And so it's useful for them to, when they're trying to model another person who's different from them. So one, I would note, how was this motivated in this population? I can at least say with myself, if you look at my genetic scores, I'm on the 98th percentile of endogenous testosterone in my developmental environment. And even today, with tons of kids in a monogamous relationship, just so you know what I mean by this, your testosterone is supposed to go down with every kid you have.
So God knows what you were before.
Yeah, you don't want to accidentally murder one of your kids or something. Like, you already secured the partner, you already won. This high risk, high reward chemical can decrease in your body. Same with monogamous relationships. When a male is in a long-term monogamous relationship, their testosterone decreases. Even now, I'm above average testosterone despite all of this. And so it appears that this was in part motivated by just unusually high testosterone in these groups. And I would assume if you did a map of the United States, you would find the males of these populations have unusually high rates of testosterone. And two, I think it's motivated by I guess I'd say, like, higher biological urge for fighting, which I definitely feel in myself within, like, games and online environments. I really tend towards games where killing people is an option. And, I think...
I mean, you don't really kill people in Civ, and you love Civ.
Yeah.
And what about Warhammer? You just bought more Warhammer.
Warhammer is, like, made for these people.
No, Warhammer's made for lore, dude. It's like saying that someone who's into BDSM is all about having sex, which
I'll
is
put
the
some
last thing you
like
get to.
Warhammer stuff here. It's like ultra masculinized. But I think it's more of a...
And I should note that I don't play games like this very much anymore. This is an anomaly for me, just because it was a uniquely good game in a universe that I liked. And that's actually an interesting thing to put a pin in. As my testosterone has dropped, because I've been in a long-term monogamous relationship and had a number of kids, the behavior patterns that seem driven by stabbiness instinct seem to have gone down a lot, like playing shooter type games instead of just pure strategy games, as well as even the media I consume. For example, I recently went back to an anime that I used to quite like called When They Cry, and I can't even put stuff from it now. If you want to get a feel of what it's like, you can just search When They Cry scenes and you'll get an idea. But I rewatched it recently and I was like, why did I enjoy this? This is just people dying over and over and over again. And for people who don't know what the theme of When They Cry was, because it had multiple seasons, is every episode takes place in the same town over and over again, and everybody ends up dying, or most of the characters end up dying by the end of an episode. And I was like, this must have been appealing to some instinct that I had in the past that I no longer have.
And this is an interesting question to ask, and we'll do likely a separate episode on this as well.
Okay.
Like, why do any humans have the propensity to want to kill other humans? By this, what I mean, and people can be like, humans don't have this propensity. And I'm like, well, most video games, and they're like, well, not all video games. They're like, even girly ones. Like, you take The Sims, and people will joke that, like, The Sims is a swimming pool murder simulator because so many people do that in The Sims. So you take Roller Coaster Tycoon, and one of the first things that everyone does is create those roller coasters that just throw people into the crowd.
Near the end, it launched the cars into a small shed with a sign on the side that said, "Enjoy your stay."
No, I never did that. I always tried to save them. I hated when those...
Or Mr. Bones' Wild Ride, where they have people in the endless line. The ride, you know, it's a thing where they'll like have the ride go on forever.
So anyone who's been on the /v/board at 4chan probably knows about Mr. Bones' Wild Ride. For those who don't, it was a ride someone made for Roller Coaster Tycoon. It was one of those really slow motor car rides but with a twist. It had 30,696 feet of track and a ride time of 70 real-time minutes, around 4 years in game time. In addition, there were those props of the skeleton holding out his top hat scattered around here and there, as if to mock the customers. Needless to say, there were a lot of passengers, screaming, "I want to get off Mr. Bones' Wild Ride." Now here's where things get really good. Once the ride came to a stop, the passengers found themselves on a long path that took about 2 hours to traverse. Once they reached the end, they found themselves facing a sign that read, "Mr. Bones says, the ride never ends." The path led straight back to the entrance of Mr. Bones' Wild Ride. There was nowhere else to go.
That's horrible.
Well, and this is the thing. I think people from other cultural groups, like my belief, and I can't model a male from another cultural group, but I actually suspect that the rates of doing stuff like this might be much, much lower for males in other cultural groups. Like this impulse just may not be very high. And this impulse, I think, is created by having one, the background stabby impulse, like the extra like that. And then two, a willingness to make life-altering decisions with patchy information, and then
I think the term is men of action.
Aggressively.
The term is men of action.
Well, you can say men of action, but I think it's better to like delineate what's actually meant by that, because yeah, and I also think that this comes back to the point I mentioned earlier, which I want to talk with you a little bit about. A lot of this, I think, comes downstream of age of first marriage. What information do you feel you need on a person before making a life-altering decision around them? And I think that if the cultural groups that have a genetic or cultural propensity towards inaction around major life decisions until full information is had, or lower levels of vitalism, either people in those cultural groups need to create rule systems for themselves around defaulting to big decisions, or build specific cultural technologies that are meant to offset the things that are killing them, like delayed marriage. When I mentioned delayed marriage is killing Catholics, like this is actually in the data. Catholics have a desperately low fertility rate in the United States. It looks like the native-born Catholic fertility rate in the United States is below the secular fertility rate right now, or at least below the average fertility rate, which is shocking. But more than that, Catholics actually have a normal high religiosity fertility rate once they're married. It's just they get married super late when contrasted with other.
And age of marriage, I think, is an underrated element.
Well, an age of marriage also is, I guess it comes from like how impatient are you about getting major life milestones out of the way? Like when I got to college, like I left college like before I was supposed to for graduation to start on my first job. Like I just could not wait to get to the first thing. I think you were very much the same way. Like,
yeah, I did not go to my Cambridge graduation, but also I think UK graduations take a really freaking long time.
Well, and I also started my college early. Like I went to the campus early. I created maps of the town in the week before I was there. I memorized them. I memorized where everything was. I was like, I need to be like 100% into this. But that's also why I got married at a relatively young age, and like why my brother did. Like my brother found his wife on the first day of college. I found my wife, desperately looking for a wife before my graduate degree because I felt like I was out of time. Like I felt like an old maid. I was like, look, this is a major life milestone that has been on the table for me basically since college started. Why haven't I been able to find somebody? I am looking as hard as I conceivably can. And so I was very impatient about completing this life milestone. And that for me played a big part. And I've noticed when I look at like my Catholic friends and stuff like that, there is not this degree of impatientness. And that's what I'm using when I'm trying to model a cultural group that's not as murdery, because, they were, although they did have high rates of organized crime with both the mafia and the mob, but they generally, if you look at places where they settled disproportionately, just seem to have lower rates of homicide overall.
Well, I feel like, and this is too off the rails for us to investigate now, but in an area that was heavily dominated by organized crime, I would still imagine murders to be lower and crime to be lower, because it's more about now there's very tight governance. It is not governmental governance. It is the governance of a crime family or syndicate.
Actually, you're right about this. I think about other areas where you have big organized crime syndicates.
They maintain order.
Yeah, I think like Japan, like was the Yakuza or the Triad in China. Even when they are engaged in crime, it's ordered crime based on rules.
Yeah.
So any murders that these groups are creating are murders based on rules, whereas the murders created by like the Greater Appalachian cultural groups are murders based on passion.
Yeah.
Like they're individual in the moment acts, not, okay, well, you crossed the organization or you are a financial threat to the organization.
Yeah.
However, this is where I'm going to say, I think that this is not what we're actually seeing here. I think this is a factor, but I think this is actually an artifact of something else.
Oh, okay.
Before we do because I said I was going to do another episode where I debunk this theory and show what we were actually looking at all along. So I'm about to send you another thing on WhatsApp here.
Okay.
I actually think what we're seeing here is specifically just the rural Appalachian cultural group. And it just so happens that that group is more murdery. But I think it's a different aspect of that group that leads to their high fertility rates. I think it's their clan-based structure and clan-based sense of identity. And if you
then why are you sending me at Asia?
Well, because we're going to look here at which group in Asia has the most clan-based identity. So I'm going to argue that there's 3 core identity types that a culture can relate to. You can either have an individualist sense of identity, a communalist sense of identity, or a clan-based system of identity. And the Mongolians have a clan-based system of identity and very high fertility rates in East Asia. Whereas the Greater Appalachian people also have a clan-based system of identity and a very high fertility rate. The Slavic people, like where they had the unusually low fertility rate, have a communalist sense of identity. So do the Chinese, so do the Japanese, and it's more that in communalist environments, usually you have lower murder rates.
Interesting.
But we'll get to this in the next episode. So,
wow.
I absolutely love you to death, Simone. Or maybe not the next episode. Maybe the episode after the next, because the next episode I'm going to do even more data, which will be coming together, because I will need to pull from this episode and the next episode before we go to the third episode. It's going to be the coup de grace on how do you actually protect fertility rates. It is with clan-based group identity, but in the next episode that I'm really excited to do, it's going to be on a study that one of our podcast listeners did. Actually, paid to have done, where he had a pretty big participant list on Mormon fertility rates and religiosity, and we find that Mormons actually their fertility rate goes down at the highest rates of religiosity. But we'll be talking about why this is the case. All right, love you.
Okay, I love you too. I'm excited for this.